You're listening to the free version of the Patreon Party People podcast, which is released 1 month after it goes up for Patreon donors. If you want to stay up to date with the latest podcasts as soon as they are released, just visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog and pledge $1 or more. Now you might ask yourself, who would pay for a podcast? And you know what? Fair enough. I am but a single person, and doing all of this stuff, that means writing scripts, capturing footage, editing video, it all takes a lot of time and effort. And that's just one thing out of many creative pursuits that also take a lot of effort to produce. So don't think of Patreon as paying for a podcast. It's about giving me the security to keep providing you with more great stuff in the future. Plus, if you donate, you'll also get sneak peeks into whatever upcoming projects I'm working on, like work-in-progress versions of videos or beta builds of games I'm developing. Don't have a Patreon account? That's fine. You'll also find links to Ko-fi, PayPal, and even Amazon wish lists. Just visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog to learn more. One more time, that's patreon.com/blazehedgehog. Hello and welcome to the Patreon Party People podcast. It is November 16th, 2020, and I am of course your host, Ryan Bloom. I actually thought of like a really fun way to intro the podcast when I woke up this morning, and then I completely forgot about it. I don't remember what it was that I was going to say. It was just one of those thoughts you have, where you're coming out of sleep for the first time, and it's sort of like you're half remembering part of a dream, and you're also just, kind of continuing on a train of thought you're not even really aware of. And I thought, I should intro the podcast like that. And that was like 5 or 6 hours ago. I don't remember what it was. So here we are. I know that's tremendously interesting and important for me to tell you that I forgot about something, but so it goes. I hope you're all doing well. It has been kind of a roller coaster month, not necessarily for content that I produce, but for, I think, the world at large. We'll just say that for a period of about 3.5 weeks, maybe longer, given content of past podcasts that I've talked about, it has been a little bit hard to concentrate on doing certain things. Being able to have, clear thoughts and tap into creative potential, as it were. It's real weird, but as soon as it looked like the United States election was going in a certain direction, all of a sudden my desire for creativity came back. Weird how that turned out. I mean, some things we'll just never be able to explain, I guess. That's just how it goes. Which is to say, I have picked up and resumed work on my Jurassic Park video after not touching it for probably close to 2 months, we'll say, a good 6-7 weeks there from, what was it, the end of Sage in late September until, November, 6th, roughly. I'm actually working on wrapping up video capture. Just getting to a point now where I can finally record voiceover. I just need to write like the ending paragraph after the video is over, the Patreon shout outs, any sort of like, last minute cleanup at the end, saying, here's how this video got made. Here's why it took me so long. I haven't released a properly edited piece of like content for you to consume in literally almost exactly 1 year to the day. But 2020 is what it is, but that's probably like actually what I'm going to say is that right there, like almost word for word, like that's something that's been in my head. But yeah, like I said, wrapping up on video capture, I finished up some pickup footage just yesterday. I have something like, 80 or 90 videos captured at this point, 2 hours of footage of the game in question, lots of clips from the movie, which, don't sweat it. Hopefully I won't get content ID for that kind of stuff. I know ways to kind of work around it for fair use purposes. Um, let's see, we have 95 items, and that's not counting images. It's not counting everything else. And as part of this, I wanted to fix my Super Nintendo, right? I think I mentioned that probably back in September, that, I was buying replacement parts for my Super Nintendo. I eBayed a copy of Jurassic Park on the Super Nintendo. I was sort of planning on actually capturing real live console footage for at least some of the video. Um, that's something that I like to do. I like to capture footage from real consoles of me really playing games. That's something I pride myself on. Um, you know, that's part of the reason why I think my videos take so long. It's because I do all the work myself. Cause when like this is something where people would say, oh, well, why don't you just have people capture video for you? That would expedite the process greatly. But the fact of the matter is, I write a script to be, something specific, and I try and capture footage around my script. It's not just a case where I could tell someone, hey, I'm making a Jurassic Park video. Will you capture me Jurassic Park footage? So that it's, kind of ready and waiting to go once the script is done. And that's a whole other kettle of fish because obviously this script has been done for like 3 years now, probably close to 4 years. I think I wrote it before we even moved out here to Nevada. It was something, a holdover from the Colorado days, where it's like, I'm moving soon. I can't really produce this video. I'm just going to have to sit on it for a while. And, here we are 3 years later. I've sat on it for quite a while. But it's a weird thing getting help for that kind of stuff. I pride myself on doing everything myself. And, maybe at some point in the future, I will get comfortable where I could hire someone to do that for me, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. My YouTube channel has been a very slow climb. I don't take things too quickly regarding my YouTube channel. And I like the work. I like learning how to edit my own videos. I pride myself on a certain kind of production quality. And to, circle back around, that's just me saying that, I was going to capture some of my own footage from a real console, and I was going to supplement some of that with footage captured from emulators. And, that obviously also creates kind of like a weird mismatch where you could tell some of it was captured from a real console and some of it was captured from an emulator, but also something you may have noticed in my videos over the last, we'll say, 2 or 3 years since I moved out here to Nevada. And my ability to capture from real hardware has become limited, is that I've started using like NTSC filters on my videos intentionally, to make them look like they are captured from old consoles. And some people, might sneer and turn their nose up at that because it's gross and, it's kind of fake. But for starters, for number one, I've captured from real hardware before. I know what that looks like. I know what to look for. I have a very high standard of quality for what an NTSC filter looks like to match what real video capture looks like. So I know all about that. I know what to look for something to match what it looks like coming out of a real console, or at least to get very, very, very close. And two, I like doing that because these games were not meant to be seen pixel perfect. They weren't supposed to be seen, super sharp pixels. They weren't supposed to be seen without line noise. They weren't supposed to be seen with clarity. The whole point of dithering is to take advantage of, CRT as a format. So I want to show these games the way they were originally intended to be seen, which is, through old capture cables, kind of a fuzzy picture, high contrast, not necessarily like super high contrast, but you know what I mean. It's supposed to look like an old video game. And I've been meaning to like run a poll to see if people actually really like that or not. I like it personally, technically it is my channel, so, ultimately I get to decide what these videos look like. But I think it's worth presenting them like that. So it was going to be this thing where, I had real footage, I'd have emulator footage. Hopefully you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But all of that was undone when just like, we'll say like 4 or 5 days ago, I finally sat down and I said, okay, since I'm making forward progress on the Jurassic Park video, I'm going to repair my Super Nintendo. You know, I bought the cartridge slot replacement and I'm going to put it in because, you know, I remember looking it up like 4 or 5, well, not even 4 or 5, like, you know, last year, maybe the year before, how to fix the cartridge slot on a Super Nintendo, and it looked really easy. So I decided, okay, I'll make a video of this. I set up my webcam, I set up my lights, I set up like a workspace with a table, because, you know, I tend to be kind of a messy person. So, you know, my desk is cluttered. So I had to, you know, make space to fix this Super Nintendo. I turned on the capture card. I recorded probably about 35 to 40 minutes of footage and had to turn the recording off because the part they sent me was wrong. Like that's just, long story short, the part was wrong. If you Google, type in Super Nintendo cartridge connector replacement, you get this little black plastic strip that looks like it should plug into a Super Nintendo motherboard. It looks like it would connect to a cartridge. And true enough, like I actually, you know, I have the Super Nintendo Jurassic Park cartridge floating around. You know, it's not packed away with all my other Super Nintendo games. So I could, you know, I saw that I could plug the cartridge in to the cartridge connector that I was sent from a website called consumercables.com. And I thought, okay, you know, it fits the cartridge. It's just going to fit into the Super Nintendo. And if you've never replaced this part before, it's actually, you know, incredibly simple. All you really need is a special, like, screwdriver. It's called, I think, like a tri-hex screwdriver, or so, it's like a tri-hex bit, or something. Instead of like being a Phillips or a flathead, it's like this nut with like these special, like, that's what it's called. It's called a security bit. Basically, it's made for the fact that you're not supposed to be able to take all this stuff apart yourself. You're supposed to send it into a Nintendo Service Center, which don't take Super Nintendos anymore. So, you know, when I bought the cartridge connector and I bought Jurassic Park, I also bought this security bit. It's not a screwdriver, what it's called. It's like a wrench, right? So I take all the screws off. I pull everything out, take the plastic off. It's super simple. There are no like ribbon cables you have to deal with. You do not have to unsolder anything. All you really have to do is get the plastic off the top of the console, unscrew a few more screws that are just basic, you know, Phillips head screwdriver screws, and then you just lift the cartridge connector off the motherboard like it was a cartridge. The cartridge connector itself is like a cartridge, is this little metal piece. And take note of that. I said that the piece they sent me was black plastic, and the actual connector itself is metal, right? Point number one, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how does all this fit together? Because the part they sent me has like all these like metal spikes on it, like these plastic teeth, and the part that I take off, the metal part, doesn't have those teeth. So right away, red flag number one, or red flag number two, rather. You know, it's plastic, not metal, and it has a different form factor. Something's not right here. So I figure out, you know, the metal teeth, the prongs on the bottom of this plastic bit, it fits on over the top of where the metal was. This is really hard without a visual aid. So you have the motherboard and you have the actual part that connects to the motherboard, which is, you know, like I said, the actual part that connects to the cartridge is like a cartridge in itself. And this sits on top of a plastic part that is basically like a cartridge connector. So how do I visualize this? This is too hard for me to describe without just showing you the video. So I'm just going to skip it. Just know that when I put the replacement part that I bought off of consumercables.com, it didn't fit. I could get it to kind of sort of fit, but it was obviously not the right part for the Super Nintendo. And this was, doubly verified by the fact that the screw holes do not line up. There are screw holes where the metal part connects to the motherboard, and you screw it down so that when you take a cartridge out, you don't pull the cartridge connector out with it. The screw holes on the thing that they sent me are like an inch too short on either side. So I can't screw it onto the motherboard. Even though it will connect to the cartridge, it will not. The moment that I power the Super Nintendo on and I pull a cartridge out, it's going to pull the connector out with it. Okay, so, what's going on here? That's my question at this point. How do I hook this up? So now, camera's still rolling. I pull out my phone and I start scrolling through tutorial videos. And every tutorial video I find is someone with the metal connector. They just bought spare parts off of eBay or whatever. And they don't have this black plastic thing, even though literally everyone that is selling a replacement cartridge connector is selling this black plastic part. All the tutorial videos don't have this black plastic part. Okay, so I'm scrolling. I hit one video. This guy is replacing his Super Nintendo cartridge, slot. And he's like, here's what they sent me. And he puts it onto the camera, and it's the black plastic part that I have. And he says, I don't know what this is. They sent it to me, and I don't know how to connect it. And I'm like, buddy, same, right? Because he has the same problem I do. What is this part for? It doesn't connect comfortably to the things that I have. So I keep scrolling, looking through more videos. And I find this guy who is repairing a version 2 Super Nintendo. So if you remember, back in the 90s, there were actually 2 models of NES and there were 2 models of Super Nintendo. There was the toaster loader NES and then there was the top loader NES. The Super Nintendo was always a top... Whoops. Sorry about that. I hit my closet. The Super Nintendo was always a top loader because Nintendo sort of learned their lesson after the NES in America. They got rid of the toaster design because it was prone to, cartridge slot failure, the way you pushed it in and locked it down and everything else. But they still did, towards the end of the Super Nintendo lifespan, they released a version 2 Super Nintendo. And it wasn't really the same sort of deal as the what was it? It was the NES Classic. I hate this terminology. There's an NES, an NES Mini, Super Nintendo Mini is what these are called, I think. And that's, version 1, version 2. But then Nintendo also released, the mini consoles the last couple years. And it muddies the water so much. Anyway, that's why I call it a version 2 Super Nintendo. So this video is this guy, and he's repairing a version 2 Super Nintendo, the smaller, more compact version. And, he's talking about, cleaning up corrosion off of a motherboard and all this other stuff. And he shows the motherboard. And from, the part that he finished repairing looks like it's the same style of parts as in the bigger Super Nintendo, the version 1. But then he shows the raw motherboard with everything pulled off of it. Just just the plastic breadboard, circuit board sort of thing where, all the rails are and where all the capacitors plug into and everything. It's just the naked board. And the part that the cartridge connector connects to that is sitting on top of the motherboard is the black plastic part that they sent me. That's what they sent me. They didn't send me the part that I needed, the part with the teeth that connect to the actual cartridge. They sent me the connector for the connector. The part where the cartridge slots onto the motherboard. This is very confusing. I know, it was really confusing for me too. So here I am. I spent, $7, $8 plus shipping on this part from consumercables.com, and they sent me the wrong part. I didn't know it at the time. I don't think they knew it at the time. They didn't have the metal part that I actually need. They just had this black plastic part. So, I can't repair the Super Nintendo because I have the wrong part. So I shut the video off and I send them an email hey, what's going on? I think you guys sent me the wrong part and you don't have the right part in stock. And I figured that would be the end of it. I've gone through things like this before There was a website, I think it was called HDSupply.com or HDTVSupply.com or something, and they sent me like a converter, like an HDMI to component cable converter, something like that. And it ended up having sound problems, right? I think I did a video about this where I was playing Sonic Adventure 2 through the Xbox 360. And, Sonic Adventure 2 is a game that has sound problems to begin with. They were greatly exacerbated by this device that I bought from HDTVSupply.com. And I complained to them about, hey, your sound is all messed up on this thing you sent me. And all I got was like just a bunch of, kerfuffle from them about how it was a problem on my end, their device can't do that, blah, 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 blah. They were basically just shrugging me off. And I remember actually leaving a product review on their page about their device, and they just straight up deleted it. So, I've dealt with these, like, I guess you'd call them like a mom and pop shop, right? Just a website where like one or two guys is just making hardware to sell, like making it in their garage or their basement or whatever, and they're running a home business. So, I sent this email off to Consumer Cables about their Super Nintendo cartridge slot replacement that they sent me, and I figured that'd be it. They'd ignore me or whatever. Like 3 or 4 days passed, and they actually sent me an apology email for, saying, oh, we're sorry, we didn't realize that we were sending you the wrong part. Here's a refund. And they refunded me all of my money. So that was actually like silver lining to all of this. I wanted to repair my Super Nintendo. I couldn't because I got sent the wrong part. And they very generously refunded me my money, which was, surprising and good. And I thank them. And it was a nice change of pace, we'll say. Because they didn't even ask me to send the part back, right? They just said, here's your money back, we're sorry. And who knows, maybe even by now they've amended the product listing on their website. Who knows? But it has, like, made me think if I really do want to repair this Super Nintendo right now. There is someone on eBay that is selling those metal cartridge connectors, the ones that I actually need to fix my Super Nintendo. They are a little more expensive than the black plastic part that I got from Consumer Cables. I think it's like $12.99 versus $7 or $8.99 that I got from Consumer Cables. But now that I'm so far along on the Jurassic Park video, I'm thinking of just kind of skipping it. Also because I found my Super Nintendo, I unpacked it, it was in a box. Like, I found it almost instantly, we'll be honest. It was just here in a box, 5 feet away from me. I could see it through, it's in like a plastic tub, and I could just see it through the plastic. What's not included with that Super Nintendo is the power adapter, the video adapter, the controller, or anything. It's just the raw console. So even if I did fix my Super Nintendo right now, I wouldn't be able to play it in any capacity without unpacking more boxes. And that's not something that I'm super keen on doing right now anyway, for a reason I'll get into later in the podcast. But needless to say, I think I might skip it for now. I'm still debating on whether or not to order the part so that I at least have it here when I need it. Because again, it's super easy to replace this. You just pull the plastic top off. There's like a piece of metal shielding that you remove. You unscrew like the power switch because that covers one of the screws. And then it's just 2 screws. You lift the cartridge connector off. You put a new cartridge connector on, again, because it just slots in like a cartridge. And then you just put everything back together. It takes, like, if I had the part, I could do it in like 2 minutes flat. It is very simple. Again, no soldering, no cutting, no ribbon cables. No nothing. You just, it's basically like a mechanical process. But I might skip it for now. Another reason I might skip it for now is because one of the other things that I wanted to do, because one of the worries I have about this Jurassic Park video is that it's going to be a little bit repetitive. Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo is in itself sort of a repetitive video game, because it doesn't have like a lot of environment types. It doesn't have a lot of enemy types. It's not a short game, but it is a game that could use a little more visual variety. So in order to make sure that my video review itself is not like super boring or repetitive in itself, I have to find new ways to show footage of Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo. And one of the ways that I was going to do that was by shooting like in-camera live-action footage of the game on my old TV. Because I still have, I have two CRT TVs. One was a gift from a friend like 10 years ago. And then the TV I have literally sitting behind me here is the same TV I've had since high school. And it still works. It still outputs an image. Back when I lived in Colorado, that's where I had like the PS2 hooked up. That's where I had the Sega Saturn hooked up, the PS1. That was my retro gaming TV. And I was gonna just use my camera, focus it on the TV and just show the game running from like different camera angles. So that instead of just having this footage of, Alan Grant wandering around the same jungle for the 700th time, I could, just spruce it up, break it up, show something a little bit different. Since I can't repair my Super Nintendo, I can't really do that, but I figured out a way to do it anyway. I almost don't even want to spoil this, but I tweeted out an image like a week ago at this point about pulling off a trick, and that picture was a work in progress of something that looks even better now. Basically, I'm going to simulate the image on my TV while it is turned off. Using sophisticated visual effects as if I was, someone who could do that. I know that's highly... Just bear with me that it's going to look great. I think it looks convincing. Because I'm not even going to get into the specifics of how I'm doing it. But just know that it really isn't that hard and that it looks really good. I think, it's the sort of thing where if you aren't listening to this podcast, I doubt you'll notice that I'm just faking an image on the TV screen. Because it looks that convincing. And it's just a matter of, finding the right filters, and like Vegas has this thing where you can manipulate the video in 3D space, and through a combination of other filters I can do like depth of field, I can do like the warp look, the way the TV screen bulges out a little bit. So there will be shots in this Jurassic Park video where there is footage of the video game running on an old TV that is 100% fake. Hopefully it'll work out like I say in the tweet. If I pull it off, nobody will even know I did anything at all. And that's the hope. That's the dream. That's like visual effects 101, right? If you do it right, nobody's going to even notice that you did it at all. And I think I've pulled it off. Whether or not those shots will actually make it into the final video remains to be seen, because I haven't started editing yet, right? Maybe it'll turn out that, everything was fine. That the video review itself doesn't seem repetitive, even though there's really only like 4 environment types in the entire game. So I don't know, we'll see. We'll see. I've written a little bit more on the Sonic Forces video script as well. I think I finally hit a point where I'm reaching the home stretch on finishing like a first draft of that script. I think I mentioned either last month or the month before, I was kind of struggling with writer's block for that video, right? I couldn't figure out how to continue it beyond a certain point. And, once again, we get past something that's very, very stressful, and suddenly my writer's block goes away. Suddenly I know what I'm doing again. So I think I've gotten over the hump. I'm sort of, I'm reaching the point that I was trying to make in the video, and it's a point that I've been trying to make in other things for, we'll say, at least 5 years. It's been a really long time. It's a thought that I've had in my head, basically since Sonic Generations came out. And it's a part that I wanted to put in my original video on how do we fix Sonic, but there wasn't really room to fit it in there and still keep the video flowing forward. So with any luck, I'm reaching a point where maybe I can start refining things a little bit more, maybe move on to like starting video capture for the Sonic Forces video. That's very exciting to me. Especially because I realized like just earlier this week that like the thing that stopped me from working on Overbite is when we moved out here to Nevada in mid 2017, I said, I owe you, that is, I'm speaking to my audience here, I owe you a Sonic Mania video and a Sonic Forces video. And the Sonic Mania video turned into 2 separate videos because I did one on Sonic Mania and one on Sonic Mania Plus. And then, all this time, it's been like, what do I do for the Sonic Forces video? Because so much time has passed, I can't just do a normal video review. It has to be something a little more like an essay, like something critical, something deconstructive. It can't just be a video of Sonic Forces bad. That's not my style. Even though I'm literally doing a video on a retro game that is basically, an old style video review. Just don't think about that. But if I get the Sonic Forces video done, then it's like, it's like this great weight will be lifted off my shoulders, and I can finally let myself start thinking about maybe actually getting back to Overbite and stop worrying about promises that I made 3, almost 4 years ago. That's exciting. That's something I'm looking forward to. But then, of course, I also have the unproduced scripts for Shenmue and Nights, and that's something to think about. But those are going to be big videos, especially Nights. I'm really starting to think that, maybe the Nights video will be 45 minutes, maybe longer. There's going to be so much artwork that needs to be made for that video, so much video that needs to be captured, so many pictures that need to be sourced. It's going to be a huge video. So I don't know when I'm going to do it. Next year, I think I've said this before, next year is the 25th anniversary of Nights into Dreams. If I'm going to do a Nights video, next year would be the time to do it. So, we'll see. Gotta focus on the Sonic Forces video first. Get that done, and then I'll be free. Dobby will be free. What else have I been doing here? I spent the last couple weeks leading up to Halloween doing sort of like a short little Halloween project in Fortnite. I don't want to talk about it too much because it was kind of a weird experience that I can't really share with you right now. But if you didn't know, Fortnite has like a creative mode, where you can basically build your own maps, build your own islands. And I think it was probably back in we'll say May or June, somewhere around there, I loaded into Fortnite's creative mode for basically the first time. And I just messed around in it a little bit. You can choose from different prefab islands. And I picked one that was just basically this big flat zone. And playing it with a friend, we were really surprised how quickly and easily you could kind of make like a landscape to roam around in. Especially because we made like a spooky environment, right? So you can set time of day, fog density. It's really easy to just drop entire building prefabs in. So they have a spooky haunted mansion, and you can just say, place the haunted mansion in the map. Boom, done. It has the lights all set up. It has all the tiles set up. It has all the props set up. You just place an entire house down and you're done. And it was just super easy, super simple. But there was obviously more depth to it. There were, gadgets and things like that you could put into the map to spawn enemies and guns. And there was currency, and there was, just all this stuff. Spawner locations, checkpoint locations, invisible walls, damage volumes. And if you play creative mode stuff that other people have made, it's actually really impressive, the kind of things that people can pull off. I think what ended up making me look into Fortnite's creative mode around, May or June is that Epic was actually impressed enough with someone's creative mode game type that they had created that they actually made it a temporary official Fortnite mode in in the game type list. It was called Search and Destroy, and it was basically just Counter-Strike, but in Fortnite. There was a buy zone where you bought different weapons with currency that you earned. during the map itself, it was really impressive. And people had made like, entire search and destroy maps that were basically, adaptations of Counter-Strike maps. You could run around and set the bomb, and there was, it was Counter-Strike just in Fortnite. So that's what got me to check out creative mode, see what was possible. And it was this thing where it was like, oh, this is interesting. I'd love to play with it more someday. And I kind of just pushed it off to the side. I decided, I'll look at this some other time. I'm busy. I can't really look at it right now. I can't even think about it right now. I forget what I was doing, but I wasn't in the mood to mess with Fortnite's creative mode. But, I kind of I bookmarked that for the future. I thought, okay, it was really easy for us to make like a spooky environment for this. Maybe I'll do something with that in the future. And probably not long after the last podcast, I loaded into creative mode just to check it out again, because even if I don't make my own maps, these last, 2 or 3 months, I've gotten into the habit of just loading into creative mode because about once a week, Epic actually features like a new creative mode lobby. So if you don't know how Fortnite's creative mode works, you have like the top level lobby, right? Where you invite your friends and you're all just kind of standing on like the home screen, sort of like PUBG. And then you pick creative mode and you load into like a separate lobby. So this second lobby is more like, say, the town in Diablo 2 or Pioneer 2 in Phantasy Star Online. It's sort of like this social space where, you and your friends run around in like a gameplay map, just browsing like game types. Because instead of just having this list of modes in the first lobby, you have like all these teleporters in the creative mode lobby that take you to different game types. And once a week, Epic features a new lobby map created by a user. And, that changes all the featured game types and everything like that. And I've gotten into the habit of just loading into creative mode just to see what the lobby looks like. Because people do some like really interesting, like artistic stuff, right? To make these custom creative mode lobbies. And I don't remember where I was going with this. All of a sudden, my brain just went empty. I just had like total brain fart. I can't remember where I was going with this. I think it's just that, I checked into the lobby once and it was like this spooky Halloween map. And I got into my head like, oh yeah, Oh, I remember now. Yes, okay. I loaded into creative mode and there was this one mode that was featured that said Fortnite the RPG, right? It was this fully featured open world RPG. And I thought, wow, can you really make something like that in Fortnite? So I loaded into this map and I started wandering around a little bit, just checking out what this person had done. And it was incredibly simple. It was like basic to the point where it wasn't even really that fun. But you could tell, they were trying and they had used like this very specific, like horseshoe design island, one of the prefab islands that you can get when you go to make your own creative mode thing. Is just this like, it's got like all these hills and it's got like a bay and it's got, it's like this horseshoe shaped island. I mean, I thought, wow, because up to this point, all I'd ever seen was like that flat sort of like GM flat grass from Gary's Mod, right? Where it's just this big flat empty open space with no sort of height variance or anything like that. So to see like, an actual like geological location with, elevation changes and mountains and hills, and it was really cool, even if I didn't enjoy the mode itself. So I thought about again, I wanted to make a spooky environment. This sort of horseshoe shaped island would be perfect for that. So I started work on, decorating this island, placing rocks and trees and buildings and structures, over the course of, we'll say, about 2 weeks. And, I had to make up this whole game type, which in itself was an adventure because making like game types in Fortnite is nothing even close to programming. Even compared to like Gary's mod, making something playable in Fortnite's creative mode is a weird nightmare. Cause, it's all these, the way I described it to my friends is that it's this weird, like, half step between Super Mario Maker and Gary's mod. Gary's mod, obviously, you can do everything to anything. You have this prop gun and you can change colors, you can change properties, you can attach ropes, you can do animation, you can do all this like really crazy stuff in Gary's mod, really deep, really complicated things. And then you get to Super Mario Maker and it's like the opposite end of that spectrum. It's very physics based. Anything that like special triggers or whatever have to deal with the game physics. This turtle shell gets knocked over here and it triggers this button. And then, it's like making something complex in Super Mario Maker is like dealing with a Rube Goldberg machine. Whereas Gary's mod is very much just, you can change anything into anything and do whatever you want. You can even just write script. You can do like Lua programming is in Gary's mod. Fortnite is this weird half step where it's a little more on the Super Mario Maker Rube Goldberg machine side of things, but they do give you like some very basic programming functions. You can hook things up to like what are called channels, which is basically just like, a Boolean on-off switch sort of flag system. And it was really hard coming up with something that worked, something that looked nice, something that played fun. I'm still not even necessarily sure that it is fun. But, for 2 weeks of work, something that I did just kind of like every now and then, it was good enough. I figured, okay, I'll have this out in time for Halloween. Fortnite, Epic has like this publishing system that you can go through. And I finished up my map and I was getting ready to publish it. And like days before I was going to publish it, Epic shut down the ability to publish new Fortnite creative islands. So I can't actually release this thing that I made because Epic took away the ability to do that. They say they're in the process of revamping their whole creator system. It's going to be back and it's going to be better than ever. And they don't have an estimated time of arrival on when that's coming. It could be weeks from now, it could be months from now, it could be never, because, the Epic Game Store still doesn't even have shopping carts. It barely has a wish list system, Epic is a very mysterious, frustrating company to deal with. And all this hullabaloo, I should have said this up top. The thing that I made is basically just like a Call of Duty zombies survival map. And that's it. Like that's basically it. You drop into this map. It's called Lost at Sea. And you have about 2.5 minutes to set up. And it'll pop up on screen, oh, something's coming. And you have 2.5 minutes to explore, find weapons, find health, find resources, and prepare for zombies. And once the 2.5 minutes up, wave 1 begins, which is basically, just the basic wimpy zombies. And then as the map progresses over a period of about 15 minutes, it gets more intense. You get stronger zombies. You earn currency to buy weapons and resources at vending machines. And it's probably about the best, most fun thing that I could make given Fortnite's constraints. But I can't release it. I don't know when it's coming. I don't know when I'll be able to publish it. For now, it's just kind of sitting on a server somewhere, waiting to be released. And I've thought about, in the interim, maybe doing a video on it, showing a couple run-throughs of the mode, things like that. I definitely could do that, but it would feel a little bit weird if I did that without being able to release it for anyone to play it. So I don't know what I'm going to do in that regard. It'll probably just sit on the server somewhere. Maybe next year I'll release it. I mean, who even knows? I should actually probably check in. Maybe they've already revamped their creator system. Epic Games support a creator. We are currently updating our online application process. Until that system is complete, new applications will be on pause. Yep, so I still can't do anything with it. Maybe I'll like throw a video up for patrons. Just kind of like a behind the scenes thing. Here's what I could publish one day. Like an early access sort of look. I don't know. It was very frustrating, let's say, to put 2 weeks of work into this thing to fight with the weird way of creating the game type, and then I can't even release it. Halloween is past. And like Epic has even actually featured like other maps people have made that are sort of similar to what I was going for. And, not to like dog on them or anything, but the other zombie game types Epic has featured in the creative mode portal, the lobby, have been kind of garbage. And like some of that is on, Fortnite creative mode. Like I said, it's not an easy thing to work with. There's like no documentation on how to do anything. I ended up posting a question on the Fortnite creative Reddit, and the only reply I got was basically someone shrugging their shoulders at me, and they said, I don't know how to do that either, dude. It's like, that's the level of what like complexity or support or whatever we're dealing with when you make something with Fortnite's creative mode, is basically just shrug shoulders. I don't know, dude, figure it out. Do it on your own. So, if someone is struggling to make something playable in Fortnite's creative mode, I get it. I'm not necessarily even going to say that my zombie survival map is like the greatest thing ever made either. It's all just, it is what it is. And I guess maybe you'll see it someday, one day, maybe in the future. Who knows? Moving on to our final topic here of the first half of the podcast. You may remember some months ago, probably around July or so, I mentioned that like the apartment complex we live in wanted to refurbish literally every unit on the property. And I thought, that's insane. They're not going to do that in the middle of a pandemic. Well, something that I've neglected to mention over the last couple months is that they are going through with that. And as of about a week ago, they started moving apartments out so that they could bring in their worker crews and refurbish all the units. From what they told us back in late October, mid-October, was it? Maybe it was late September, is basically that, what will happen is that we'll get like a notice and they'll say you have like 1 or 2 weeks to pack up all your stuff. And then they'll bring in a moving crew and they'll take all of our stuff out of the apartment except for, I think they said, beds and a TV. And then during the day for a whole week, construction crews will come in and replace all the cabinets, all the appliances, all the carpet, the entire bathroom, all the plumbing, day by day by day. And basically it sounds like from say around 6 o'clock in the morning to about 5 o'clock at night, there will be crews in the apartment, refurbishing everything. And then after 5 o'clock, we're allowed to go back into the apartment and sleep and cook and, whatever else. Actually, we don't even get to cook. They'll be providing the meals for us. And during the days where we can't be inside the apartment because the refurbishing crew is in there, they have a hospitality trailer, which honestly, in the middle of a pandemic sounds like an incredibly dangerous thing. But they'll be moving through, I think it's like 6 apartments a week. And they said it'll go up through next year. So we don't really know when we're going to be moving out of this apartment. But when we come back, after the week or whatever, it'll be like a top to bottom, almost different place. Brand new carpet, brand new appliances, brand new everything. And it's going to be a super weird thing. But that's coming. I don't know when that's coming. They said they'd start alphabetically. So we have, apartments in the A block, the B block, the C block, so on. We're somewhere near like the first quarter of the alphabet, we'll say, second quarter of the alphabet, somewhere around in there. So we figured 6 units a week we would probably be up for renovation somewhere late December, early January, maybe late January, early February, somewhere around there. It all depends on how long it takes. And they will be taking breaks for the holidays, so, Thanksgiving will roll around. They won't be doing any renovation then. Christmas will roll around. They won't do any renovation then either. It's just, it's a big mess, and it's coming soon. Probably next podcast you hear, for patrons anyway, maybe podcast after that will be right around the time where I should think about, packing up all my stuff, and so that we can move out of here for a week and then move back in the week after that. I'm really not looking forward to it. Especially, like I said, any other time I'd be super down for it, Come in, renovate our apartment, whatever. That'll be fine. I'd love that. Get all new appliances and everything, whatever. But, in the middle of a pandemic, that does worry me. Fortunately, there is news that, there may be a vaccine soon, so maybe we'll get lucky. I doubt it. I doubt there'll be vaccines for everyone come February, but we'll find out. But that's going to be it for the end of the first segment of the podcast. I'm going to take a break now, go get a drink, go to the bathroom, maybe get some lunch. It's getting to be about that time. And we'll come back with TV, movies, video games, whatever. It's going to be a big segment. Since the last podcast, I have watched very many Halloween movies, and we're going to run through them as quickly as we can. So stay tuned for that after this break. Back. Like I said before the break, I have quite a lot to talk about here in this segment, because as you know, it is now November. The last podcast I recorded was before Halloween, and I tend to watch a lot of Halloween movies with my friends, usually every weekend, sometimes multiple times throughout the week leading up to Halloween, And what this ultimately ended up meaning is that between the last podcast and this podcast, I watched something like 11 or 12 movies. And if you know me, I usually don't watch too many movies. I mean, I do watch movies. I don't want to say that I don't watch movies, because I do. And I have, quite a collection of movies. My digital collection of movies is starting to grow. I prefer to have movies on disc. I have all my favorites. We have a huge collection of DVDs and a growing collection of Blu-rays. But, I also tend to get trapped in a cycle of just watching my YouTube subscriptions day after day, week after week. And I probably don't watch as many movies as I should. But obviously, I tend to make up for it quite a bit here around Halloween. And not only did I watch a bunch of movies with my friends, but I also just watched a bunch of movies of my own accord. So, 10 movies a month is a pretty decent deal, I would say. 10 or 11, 12, or so movies. So we're just going to run through these super quick, because I do think, all of them are worth talking about a little bit at the very least. So, we'll do these sort of chronological order, let's say. Starting with a movie called House Llc. This is a found footage movie about a group of down on their luck New Yorkers. They come to this made up town called Abaddon, also located in New York. and they've bought the Abaddon Hotel, which is an abandoned location that they don't really touch on the history too much. I mean, they kind of do. I mean, the whole movie is essentially about what happened at the Abaddon Hotel. But you get the impression that they kind of bought it sight unseen, and they're going to set up a haunted house attraction, like a walkthrough sort of deal, where they charge people at the door, and then you walk through like a spooky environment. It was an okay movie. It was not a fantastic movie. My main problem with it is it's very light on plot, I'd say. You don't really get a sense of the characters. You get just a tiny little bit of setup at the beginning of the movie, and then it kind of just all the character development and everything just kind of slowly fades into the background, and you're not really sure who is who. Or I couldn't even remember any of their names really, because you just don't get a sense of these people. You don't know who they are. They're just kind of like this general amalgamated blob of just of nobodies basically. And the movie is much more about sort of setting up these spooky scenes, and they're really good spooky scenes. They're kind of very subtly spooky. They don't really get in your face too much. There's a lot of blink and you'll miss it sort of scares, just little things out of the corner of your eye that the movie doesn't really draw your attention to. They're just there if you notice them, and that's really good. It's got a really good spooky atmosphere. It's just there's not enough story, there's not enough plot. You don't really get a sense of who any of these characters are. It's just, oh, spooky things are coming, and that's kind of the entire story. Is just, oh, something happened at the Abaddon Hotel on Halloween night. It's just the build up to that. Especially minor spoilers, the ending is a little disappointing. Because obviously, the very first scene in the movie sets up something happened here on Halloween night. What happened? And then you finally get to the end of the movie where it shows what happened, and it doesn't actually really show what happened. It shows the least important parts of what happened that night, and you still don't really get a sense of what went on. That's kind of a bummer. I mean, they do explain, they do show some things, but most of it is very much just sort of a found footage. Oh, you can't tell what's happening. Oh, what's going on? That's kind of a bummer. But, atmosphere-wise, great movie. Just needed a little more plot to hang on to. And I guess there's 3 or 4 sequels to Hell House LLC. So, I'm sure, the Hell House universe, is cinematic universe, I'm sure there's more to chew on if I really wanted to explore that. But, I'm shaking my head. No, I don't need to see Hell House 2. Of course, who knows? Maybe Halloween 2021, my friends will say, let's watch Hell House 2. Let's watch Hell House 3. And maybe there's a Hell House 4. I don't know. I know there's at least 3. After that, we watched the Mortuary Collection, which is an anthology movie where Clancy Brown stars as the perfect mortuary, cemetery mortician. That's what I'm trying to. Clancy Brown plays the perfect mortician. His voice is just, it is amazing, and just his performance alone might make the anthology for me. It's about this girl, she's looking for work, so she comes to this mortuary, and it's I hear you're hiring. I'd like your job. And the mortician's oh, you're not cut out for this. And she kind of dares him to tell her the weirdest stories from his career. And she kind of has critiques for him, and they kind of have this back and forth about oh, it's not so scary, I can hack it, and things like that. And it's a pretty fun collection of horror stories. Probably a little raunchy if you're the kind of person that gets bothered by that kind of humor. There's one particular story that is There's a scene in one of those stories. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not even going to hint at it. But it is one of the most unexpected things I think I've ever seen in a movie. Because oh boy. Overall, Mortuary collection was okay. It was definitely a case where I think it was better than I was expecting. But it's kind of got like this dark sense of humor to it that like gets right on the edge of kind of being a little too much. I definitely had a lot of moments where it felt like I was going to roll my eyes at the movie's sense of humor. And then, right as that's going to happen, right as I'm like, oh, ugh, enough already. Then it does something really cool and it kind of sticks the landing. And for that, that's really good. I really appreciate that. Like I said, definitely a lot better than I expected. The Mortuary collection, a solid 8 or 9 out of 10, let's say. After that, we watched The Crimson Cult, which is a very old movie from like 1968, kind of basically only notable for having Boris Karloff and Christopher Lee in it together, right? A tremendously boring movie, just absolutely the worst. Was not very fun to watch in the slightest. Really like confusing and bland and pointless storyline. What even is it about? This guy goes missing and like his brother heads out into the countryside to go look for him, and he finds like this plot about an evil legendary witch who's like in the movie for 2 scenes. And like the ending, oh my gosh, the ending is the worst. Like this whole movie is like, oh, ooh, Christopher Lee and Boris Karloff, they're the bad guys. What are they gonna do? And then the end of the movie is just so limp and pointless and almost random in a sense, right? Like nothing really gets resolved. Nobody really faces any consequences. And like the whole last 5 or 10 minutes is one of the characters like explaining this, this battle between good and evil that supposedly happened off screen decades before that we never got to see. It's like all the exciting stuff in this movie is somebody telling you about it that did not happen in the movie itself. Just absolutely terrible. The Crimson Cult, do not watch. There are so many other movies with Christopher Lee and Boris Karloff in them that are probably much better. Arguably, I haven't seen very many of them, but that's not to say, they're legendary actors, of course. There's going to be great movies with them in. Go watch like a Hammer horror movie. Dracula. Christopher Lee is a great Dracula. Boris Karloff is, he's Boris Karloff. Go watch Black Sabbath. That's a good movie with Boris Karloff in it. After The Crimson Cult, we watched Halloween Party, which I think might be a 2020 release. I'm not sure. Apparently my friends chose to watch Halloween Party exclusively because there's a weird meme about it. I'm not gonna say it here on the podcast, but it's a very strange movie about like a computer virus that spreads through an internet meme where you are asked about your worst fear, and then whatever your worst fear is comes and it kills you. That's the whole premise of the movie. And it's kind of a charming movie. Like it's not great. I wouldn't say like it's amazing. In fact, I'd probably go as far as to say it's a bad movie, but it's charmingly bad. It is very much like zero budget movie. They spent absolutely nothing on this. If they had any budget, it probably went into special effects, for a couple very specific scenes for, different types of monsters and whatever. But most of it, like watching it, I joked that it looked like a YouTube video because that's kind of the production quality we're talking about here. It's all very much, here are sets that we have access to that are just real locations in the world. Whenever they need like title cards or font treatments, it's all like things that you could do in like Sony Vegas. It's very, 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 very low budget. And And it's kind of only really saved by the fact that the movie doesn't really take itself that seriously. It takes itself just seriously enough that you don't feel like it's a comedy, like it's not, it's not trying to make fun of itself, but it is not serious. It's definitely got, kind of like a tongue-in-cheek quality to it, where it's just very much like, hey, we know we're low budget. Ha, that's pretty cool, right? Not even like that. Like that's selling it wrong. But it's got like really snarky dialogue, kind of funny characters, and it takes its premise seriously, but it does not take itself seriously, if that makes any sense. It's a whole weird amalgam of different things. Like I'm not doing it justice. It's just a very weird, bad, charmingly bad movie that maybe you should watch. I know that's an incredible endorsement. After that, we watched Fright Night, the 1985 version. Like super classic movie, like just absolutely great. If you don't know what Fright Night is, it's kind of like this classic horror story concept where, a vampire moves in next door to some kid, and the kid notices that his new next door neighbor is a vampire, and oh my gosh, what do we do about that? There are murder reports coming up on the news. Oh no, the vampire is killing them. I have to warn the world, but nobody will believe me. Ooh. And that works. It's a tried and true sort of concept because it works. The movie itself kind of reminds me of the Tom Hanks movie The Burbs a little bit, sort of like The Burbs meets Dracula. And maybe like in retrospect, maybe The Burbs was trying to be more like Fright Night. But it's a great movie, very 80s. Very much like a love letter to, earlier I mentioned Christopher Lee and Hammer horror. Fright Night is very much a love letter to 1960s Hammer horror. A lot of the plot involves contacting like a late night TV show host who starred in Hammer horror movies, or like a parody of Hammer horror movies. And that's kind of the crux of the whole movie, is sort of paying respect to these old 1960s horror movies, these British horror movies in particular. And it really, really, really nails a very specific vibe that, maybe if you're born after 1997 or whatever, maybe it doesn't really work for you. But as, me, someone who was born sort of mid to early 80s and mainly has memory of the early to mid to late 90s, it works for me because I do sort of have a very small amount of appreciation for Hammer horror. I grew up kind of knowing who Elvira is. I grew up knowing about like the horror host movie format, which this movie is very much about. But definitely would recommend, if you haven't seen it, Fright Night 1985. We were going to watch the 2011 remake too, but we couldn't find a way to like successfully do a group stream of that. Apparently the 2011 remake is great too. Maybe if you're a little bit of the younger generation, maybe seek out the remake instead, because I hear it updates a lot of the references to be a little more modernized while still basically telling the same story. After that, we watched John Carpenter's The Thing, which is a movie I'd never normally watch on my own because I get a little bit weird about gore sometimes. It's kind of a long story. I think I've brought it up here on the podcast before. It's not necessarily that like gore makes me sick. It's the idea of being sick that makes me sick. And it's one of those things where, I can very easily psych myself out and kind of get in like this loop of anxiety where it's like, oh no, this is gross. It's going to make me sick. And then that makes me sick. And it's a whole like anxiety problem that I have. It's very much been a struggle for most of my life. I should probably see a doctor about it and maybe get medicated at some point. Maybe I said that last time when I brought this up too. But since it was with friends, I decided to try and tough it out. And, I made it through the movie just fine. And that is a very good movie. You can definitely see why a lot of people speak very highly of John Carpenter's The Thing. The visual effects are just totally amazing, completely believable in every regard. A landmark of practical effects where they're using real puppets and real fake blood, and it's just, oh boy, and and it's not just like this incredible special effects showcase. There's like a really good story at the core of it too. It is like the complete package. Just an absolutely amazing movie. If you haven't seen John Carpenter's The Thing yet, and you are in any way tolerable of horror, please make a point to watch this movie. We also watched Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. I've never seen a Friday the 13th movie before because, again, I kind of get weird with gore sometimes. I've also never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street movie either, same reason. But again, I was with friends. We watched this as a group stream. I figured I'd tough it out. And it was... I almost said it was a great movie. It is sort of a great movie. I can see why some people were complaining about Friday the 13th as a franchise. It kind of has this history of sort of being like this clone, right, of John Carpenter's Halloween, which, started this whole slasher movie craze. And Friday the 13th was like, this it was another big example, another sort of like landmark of the genre. And it feels kind of like torture porn in a sense. I know Jason Lives is the one that kind of really introduced like self-referential humor to the series. It is widely regarded as one of the best Friday the 13th movies because it very much is sort of about, kind of lampshading a little bit horror movie tropes in a sense. It's very much, a little bit silly, very over the top. But it's also just about an angry man running through the woods killing innocent people, and it's like, that kind of sucks. That kind of sucks a lot, really. Like, a lot of the people that Jason kills don't deserve it, and he just does horrible, terrible, nasty things to them, and that's just the movie for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, is just people dying, and it's like nobody deserves it. Some of them, suffer for it. You see them suffer, and it's like, and like, it didn't pick up on the microphone last time. The motorcycle is leaving now. Maybe it's picking up on the microphone now. But it's just very much watching someone kill a bunch of teenagers for no reason. And it's like, you think about the type of person like a gorehound or whatever you want to call them, that really, really, loves these movies for the gore effects and, they cheer for the kills and whatever else. And, that's still kind of weird to me. That may always be weird to me. It was a fun movie in a lot of respects, but I can definitely see how it's not for everyone. And I'm not entirely sure that it was for me. But I didn't hate it. I had a relatively enjoyable time with it. I just felt a little dismayed by how much it celebrated murder, if that's a controversial statement to make. Halloween night, I ended up watching 2 movies back to back. Dracula from 1931, the classic Bela Lugosi one. And that is not a movie that has aged very well. It's definitely, totally iconic. You cannot beat Bela Lugosi as Dracula. He is that character. He will never be anything but Dracula. But that movie's old. That movie is so old, it doesn't have background music. It has abject silence for the entire thing. If nobody is talking and the microphones aren't picking up any on-set audio, it is deathly silent. And there are entire stretches of that movie that feel like they go on for several minutes that do not have any audio to speak of whatsoever. And that's not even like the plot of this movie is disjointed, let's say. You get the basic beats, Renfield goes to Castle Dracula. Dracula vampirizes Renfield, I guess you'd say. Dracula comes to America. Dracula run rampant over America. You get the basic beats. But so much of this movie feels like disconnected scenes featuring Dracula. They don't feel like a coherent narrative. And it just feels so old. And I don't mean to say that derogatorily, right? Normally, I'm really good at putting myself in the headspace for watching old movies. I've watched movies from the 1940s. I've watched movies from the 1950s. I've watched black and white movies. I've watched silent films like Metropolis and came away like, wow, that was a really good movie. But Dracula from 1931 is hard to watch. It is hard to watch because it's just so early. It is so it establishes so much, but it's just hard to watch. It's hard to get into. But it was really interesting seeing how Fright Night references scenes from the 1931 Dracula. How Fright Night references lore from the 1931 Dracula. There's one specific part that kind of explains why so many vampire movies are about the one guy noticing a vampire and nobody will believe him. And that's because, apparently according to vampire lore, they very specifically prey on that concept that nobody will believe that vampires are real. And that's awesome. And there's a very specific scene with a mirror in Dracula that Fright Night directly references. So, in terms of deepening my understanding of the horror genre or whatever, I'm happy that I watched Dracula, but I will never recommend that movie to anyone else because it is a hard watch. You really have to be into it. You really have to dedicate yourself to trying to like this movie. And then, to chase Dracula, to try and, gotta wash the taste of this movie out of my mouth, after it, I watched the new Addams Family movie, the animated one, and that also was not a great movie. It's one of those things where I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there that are like, oh, it's fine, it's for kids. And that's true. The animated Addams Family movie is for children. And because it's for children, I guess they were okay with cutting all kinds of corners. Characterization is really flat. The Addams Family themselves aren't very weird. The animation looks really cheap. The character designs are super ugly. There's lots of random pop music in the movie for no reason. I think at one point Lurch even sings a pop song. It's just, it's a bad movie. That's, you want to talk about okay, here's what makes it a terrible movie, right? So what are movies? What's a storyline? Storylines are conflict, right? Characters have a problem that they're trying to resolve. And every movie, every story, everything is about resolving a conflict. That's how quests get started. That's how fights get started. That's how, enemies get labeled, is people have a conflict that they need to resolve. And Addams Family starts having these conflicts. They set up villains, they set up problems to solve, and then those problems just kind of evaporate into smoke. Nobody has a fight. There's nobody clashes. It's just, there are problems, and then slowly the problems just disintegrate. nobody learns anything, nobody grows, nobody changes, nobody does anything. It's just, there's no problems anymore. The end. That's the movie. That's Addams Family 2019. Nobody gets defeated or, there's just no story. Or there is a story, but it goes nowhere. Everyone just is happy the end. But again, people will say, oh, it's a kid's movie. It's allowed. It doesn't have to be deep. I don't necessarily agree with that, but this isn't the podcast to get into that for. But just no. Addams Family 2019, bad movie. Just a kid's movie, totally forgettable. Watch the Raul Julia, the live action one, Addams Family and Addams Family Values. Those still hold up. They are still fantastic, amazing, funny movies. Addams Family Values, one of the rare sequels that actually lives up to the original movie. But don't watch the new one. You can skip the new one. And while reviewing the new one, because I posted reviews for probably more than half of these up on like Letterboxd and IMDB, while looking up and posting my review for the Addams Family, I learned that like just a few weeks ago they confirmed that there's going to be a sequel. So, that's probably not going to be a good movie either. And then on my own time, I also watched Redline again. But we don't need to talk about Redline again. I've already talked about Redline on this podcast at least twice. I tend to watch that movie a lot. It's one of my favorite anime movies. But we're not going to get into that. I've already talked about that movie twice. We also, for Halloween, it's kind of become like this tradition. We watched a movie called Axum. I'm not going to talk about Axum either. I'll just link my IMDb review for Axum in the podcast show notes if you want to go see what I have to say about a very bad horror movie called Axum that is actually secretly great for the wrong reasons. Games-wise, I haven't really been playing too much. I went back and played a little bit more of the Ghostbusters, the video game remastered. I think I'm almost done with that. I think I'm in the final area of the game. It's kind of like this weird, spooky ghost island, and we're learning like the source of where all ectoplasm comes from and all this other stuff. That game's fine. It's not the best game ever. The writing can be a very hit or miss. Especially like in the gameplay department, it's a little shaky. They try and make catching ghosts fun, even though it's not really supposed to be very fun. The whole like lasso and capture thing, when like you really break it down, it's not super fun. Like even if it was simulated perfectly, and I don't think this game simulates it perfectly, it's not a very fun concept. It's just, these guys are like working Joes. They're exterminators. They're, it's like they're going in to catch bugs, except instead of bugs, it's ghosts. And the way Ghostbusters, the video game, deals with that is that slowly it stops being about catching ghosts and starts being about shooting ghosts and killing ghosts. Even though you kind of can't kill a ghost because ghosts are already dead, But, they give you like a shotgun equivalent. They give you like an automatic rifle equivalent. And then they give you like other gadgets like a slime gun and other things like that. It's fine. It's not great. It's not outstanding. It looks okay. The sound on the remaster is a little bit of a mess. They kind of like broke the stereo separation. I play that game with headphones a lot, and it kind of sounds like a nightmare sometimes. Just it's the way the panning works, right? You'll have someone standing on your left, and if they're even just standing like a couple inches to your left, all of their audio will exclusively come out of your left headphone. You won't get any audio in your right headphone. And if you don't know what that means, it's just an audio thing. It doesn't sound good. I mean, it sounds listenable, but it's just a very weird problem with stereo speakers. Just boo. But, like I keep saying, the game itself is fine. It's not going to win any awards. It's not going to break any records. It's probably like the closest thing we'll ever get to Ghostbusters 3. I think it is very specifically based on an old script that was going to be Ghostbusters 3. But it's just fine. It's not great. But you could do worse. And it was given away for free recently on the Epic Game Store, so there's probably a pretty good chance that you own it now. So, it might be worth looking into a little bit at the very least. I just recommend that you play that game on easy mode. Trust me on this. It may not make ghost catching very fun, but when it comes to how the game ramps up the shooter segments, you definitely want easy mode, because it will kick your butt. Like, just straight up. Like, no remorse, it will just kick your butt. Besides that, earlier I said I was messing around in Fortnite's creative mode. Fortnitemares, their Halloween event, came and went, filled the map with fog, and sort of introduced this new game mode where every time you eliminate someone in the map, they come back as a ghost. It kind of reminded me of an old Half-Life mod that I used to play called Zombie Panic. And apparently, I've talked about Zombie Panic online, like on Twitter and on my blog and whatever else. Apparently, Zombie Panic still has servers up, and there are still people that play Zombie Panic in 2020. But Zombie Panic, is the typical idea where, if you die, you get switched to a zombie team. And as the zombie team grows, it gets easier and easier and easier to kill the survivors. Until, literally it's a case where you have a server, 12, 15, 16 people, and there's only one human left. And you have this whole team of just zombies trying to descend on the last survivor. And that's a good feeling. That's where Zombie Panic was the most fun, is just seeing this one human somehow avoid 14 zombies as they're all just barreling at him at top speed. And Fortnitemares kind of had that sort of vibe to it, because that's exactly what would happen, right? 100 people will drop into a map, and slowly as they died, one by one, they'd all get shuffled to the ghost team. And, it was up to their survivors to not only shoot their fellow humans, but to get rid of the ghosts too, because if you killed a ghost in Fortnite, it's gone. It explodes in like this cloud of smoke, and then you're really out of the game. And it just it had that fun where you'd be upset for a minute that you got killed, but then you'd spawn back into the map as a ghost, and then it was like, ooh, let's go, fellas, let's all gang up and get the last guy. And you'd see all these ghosts just kind of swarm the last remaining human, and it'd be like, yeah, we did it. And it was fun. I liked that. That was good. It's not something that I'd want all year round, but it's something that I'm good with just being a temporary Halloween thing. Like, I'm sort of glad that it's gone, but it was nice to have while it lasted. And then finally, I bought a new racing game called Hotshot Racing on the Switch. But I haven't really played too much of it yet, so I can't really form a complete opinion of it yet. I was just kind of jonesing for a new racing game after the debacle that was Need for Speed Payback, right? I talked about that, I think it was last month or the month before. Just what a total mess that game is. Just a disappointment top to bottom. And Hotshot Racing is kind of it's like a faux retro game. It's definitely going for like the aesthetic of, say, a Ridge Racer or a Virtua Racing or like Daytona USA, right? Definitely that sort of mid to late 90s arcade racing game experience. No textures or very little textures, just brightly colored polygons. I mean, it's fine, I enjoy it. It has drifting mechanics, sort of like the PSP Ridge Racer games where you drift to build up a boost meter. But it kind of bothers me a little bit because the physics feel a little too realistic, if that makes any sense. You think about arcade racers from that era, Daytona USA doesn't feel very realistic. Ridge Racer definitely doesn't feel very realistic. Even like Sega Rally Championship, which is probably one of like the more realistic arcade racers of that era, doesn't feel realistic. And Hotshot Racing feels just realistic enough that it kind of bothers me a little bit. You definitely have, weight to your car. It feels a little too like it has a real physics engine running under the hood, so to speak. And that really wasn't the sort of thing that came into prominence in racing games until, we'll say, like the very first Gran Turismo in 1997. And this is definitely cut more from like a 1993, 1994 arcade racer sort of cloth. It's also like, so far, it seems really heavy on like rubber banding. It's the sort of game where you can't really stay in the lead for very long. And I can kind of see that getting annoying as the difficulty ramps up. Because it's very much a case where, you get into first place for a few seconds, and then a rival racer will pull ahead of you. And then the moment like a rival racer gets too far ahead of you, it's like their rubber banding switches off and you catch up to them. And it's just this constant back and forth every race where you're getting first, losing first, getting first, losing first, getting first, just back and forth, over and over and over and over and over again. And, that kind of, like, I understand why they do that. But at the same time, it kind of sucks that I can't, like, get a lead and keep a lead. My opponents, no matter how fast I drive, no matter how well I drive, it seems like they're always on my tail. Always, 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 always. And I don't know if I'm necessarily a fan of that. It's fine. I'm more or less enjoying it for what it is. So far, it kind of reminds me of some ideas I had once for a racing game that I wanted to make. Because, in this game, like every racer has a personality, right? They're not just a name and a car. They're a person. They're a human being. They have like quips that they say during races. And I think that kind of characterization is something that more racing games need. And that's kind of something that, I thought if I ever made a racing game in the future, that's something that I'd want to put into one of my games. And, here it is in Hotshot Racing. And I think, I really appreciate that someone is on the same page as me in that regard. But, overall, the jury remains out on whether or not I like Hotshot Racing or not. Definitely the sort of game where I'm thinking, maybe I should write a review for bltn.net. Because it could be that, it's a recent enough release. It's only like a few months old. And I mainly bought it to have something to play, during the move, whenever that happens. And, I realize I probably bought it a little bit early if we're not going to be doing anything until January or February, as it were. But I also just wanted to play it. Like that's the long and the short of it. I wanted to play Hotshot Racing. And it was cheap. It was like $15, so not really sweating it too much. But I think that's going to be the end of the podcast. I think I've run out of things to talk about. So, I will see you guys next month. Hopefully sometime soon. We'll get a Jurassic Park video out the door. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I need to get it done preferably before the end of November, because we're currently in, YouTube sweeps month or whatever you want to call it. The big holiday rush for advertising on YouTube. So I definitely need to get this Jurassic Park video done sooner rather than later. I mean, this is kind of the same scenario I was in last year with the Sonic 3 video, right? So anyway, I'm gonna end this podcast now. I hope you all have a safe and happy holidays. Stay inside, stay home. Don't let the family talk you into going to a Thanksgiving dinner. You're only gonna regret it. Okay, bye.